Chapter 20. They didn't know until they were folded in their mother's arms, smelling the powder on her neck, hearing her say their names over and over, that they were back. Their dad blew his nose and cried. Someone gave him another handkerchief, and he laughed, and then he cried again. Margaret let him carry her to the car. She lay in the back seat with her eyes closed, resting, being back. They went right to the hospital to make sure they were okay. Then Margaret told the story just as she had practiced it with Nicodemus. Their questions weren't as hard as his, but she was glad when they stopped asking. Her dad and a doctor talked to the press. Both the children were in good condition considering their ordeal, and amazingly, Arthur's asthma seemed cured. Flashbulbs popped. People were laughing and shouting as if they were at a big party. Still, Margaret felt scared. What if they didn't believe her? Then it was over. They were whisked out a side door, but a red-haired woman was waiting there. Of course I remember you, her mom said. You helped us during the search. They spoke together for a moment. Call us in a few days, her mom said. Who was that? Lindsay Scott. She's a reporter, but I'll tell you about that later. Now it's time to go home. Home was wonderful. Soft corduroy chairs and thick rugs and cookies and soda and comic books and stuffed animals and brand new slippers for both of them. Margaret had a bath. She couldn't believe the dark brown of her body against the white tub. Her legs were covered with scrapes and bruises she'd hardly noticed in the valley. When she shampooed her hair, she felt like Santa Claus with a huge mane of bubbles. She dabbed perfume and bath oil and aftershave lotion all over and then wrapped herself in a thick bathrobe. Her dad had bought a video of Walt Disney cartoons, and she and Arthur sat on the sofa eating popcorn and drinking hot chocolate. They didn't talk about what had happened or about what would happen later. They fell asleep on the sofa, both of them, and their parents carried them upstairs and put them to bed. Arthur spent the next day in his pajamas, eating M&Ms and playing with all the stuff in his toy box. There were toys in there he'd forgotten about, like his hop-along teddy and the driving seat with the lights that really flashed when you moved the turn signal. Christopher would love that. Christopher didn't have many toys. He had a wooden ball and a stick to hit it with, and a doll bed made from a nutshell. He had paper and blue ink and purple ink and a headband made of mica and a top made from an acorn. Arthur held his hop-along teddy in his lap and stroked its woolly fur. Christopher was far away now. He was a secret, like the secret in the closet. But he'd said he would come. The doorbell rang. Arthur jumped up and ran to see who it was, but it was only Leon, Margaret's friend. Come in, Leon. Margaret's upstairs. I'll tell her you're here. Their mom gave Leon a hug. Isn't this wonderful? Yes, Mrs. Livingston. Leon managed to wriggle out and stood looking at the carpet. Hi! Margaret smiled at him from the upstairs landing. Come on up. I've been waiting for you. Right. Leon climbed the steps two at a time. When he got into her room, Margaret saw that he was taller. She felt shy. She thought of the hundreds of conversations she'd had with Leon when he wasn't there. She sat down on the bed. Hi. Hi, she repeated. I saw you on TV after you called. You and Artie were on every channel. They even interrupted a ball game with the special bulletin. Yeah, Margaret smiled. She'd been on television. Everyone would have seen her. But Leon didn't seem too excited about that. He was standing with his hands in his pockets. What happened while I was gone? Margaret had intended the question to be about her, about what the kids had said when she was lost, but Leon didn't answer it that way. Instead, he said, Graham died. Oh, she had a stroke. A stroke? It had never occurred to Margaret that anything would have changed while she was gone. She and Nicodemus hadn't talked about that. She didn't know what to say. I I never thought. That's okay, Leon mumbled. She was really old, you know. Margaret felt awful. She tried to change the subject. How's school? Okay. The kids held a memorial service for you, and lots of the girls were crying. Eleanor and Patty and Roseanne. What did you do for your birthday? Oh, Leon shifted from one foot to the other. Hal and Tammy and I went to Glen Falls. I rode the Cyclops 12 times. You went to Glen Falls Amusement Park with Tammy? Margaret thought they'd agreed that Tammy was a jerk. Furthermore, Leon usually spent his birthday with her. Margaret, he glared. Didn't you mind that I was gone? Of course I did. Leon frowned. Well, I missed you. Sometimes in my mind, I talk to you. What did you say? Oh, just things about what was happening. I was lonely and scared too, and I couldn't say that to Artie. You look different. Leon was staring. Your face is tan, your hair's long, and you're not as fat as you were. I wasn't fat. She would have liked to tell Leon about the rats who tried to get as fat as they could during the fall in case they had a hard winter. Christopher was hoping to turn into a little gray ball. She tried to shift her thoughts, but Leon broke in. On TV, they said you knew how to eat in the wilderness from watching the E.L. Gibbons show. I started laughing. I remember how we used to poke fun at that old guy. I guess some of it soaked in anyway, Margaret said uneasily. That happens, you know. He looked at her doubtfully. I learned a lot of things just by being there, Margaret said to fill the silence. I built a hut for Artie and me to sleep in. I even climbed a cliff. Why would you want to do that? I wanted to look in a hawk's nest to see if there were any eggs we could eat. How could you get the eggs down without breaking them? I lowered them down in my sweatshirt with a rope made of vines. How did you make the rope? I figured it out. The old thing sounds like Wonder Woman or something, Leon interrupted. This doesn't sound like you. I changed, I guess. I had to. Leon didn't say anything. The valley is so beautiful. Margaret's voice felt weak. There are mountains on both sides, and a creek runs through a field covered with flowers. It's like something you'd see on TV, except it's real. He broke off. Sounds pretty, Leon said, but he was still looking at her like he didn't believe her. I want you to tell me more about it, he said slowly. Like what you did all day, stuff like that. Okay, Margaret shrugged as if that would be easy. She thought of the wheat field and the dam, but of course she couldn't tell about those. She opened her mouth, hoping the right words would come out, but nothing happened. What's the matter? Nothing. It just, I'm a little tired right now, and it's hard for me to think about being lost and all. I'll tell you another time. When? Tomorrow, maybe? Sure. Leon hung around for a while longer, even though Margaret felt really uncomfortable. She'd never felt that way around him before. He seemed to sense it, too, but he wouldn't give up. I read the Swiss Family Robinson this summer. That's about a whole family that gets shipwrecked on an island. They have to build their own house and plant crops and catch fish and everything, sort of like you and Artie. Yeah, you will tell me about it, right? I really want to know. Sure, Margaret said. Her throat felt dry. Tomorrow, right? Yeah. She nodded, but she knew she could not. Chapter 21. The day the reporter called about the interview was the same day Margaret went back to school. The telephone rang during breakfast. Her mom held one hand over the mouthpiece and said, "It's that reporter, Lindsay Scott. Remember, we met her as we were leaving the press conference? She'd like to interview you, Margaret." "I don't know." Margaret's mouth was full of toast and her mind was on school. "Maybe." "She's awfully nice. She says it wouldn't be a long interview, maybe 20 minutes. This Friday evening. What do you think?" It was easier and less suspicious to say yes. Margaret nodded. "Okay." Her mom got directions. She hung up the phone and came over to Margaret. "It must be hard going back to school after all that's happened. But after this interview Friday, we'll put the past behind us. We'll settle down and be like we used to be." She put her hand on Margaret's shoulder. "I don't know if I'll ever be like I used to be," Margaret said. It was hard to swallow her toast. "You'll always be my dear, sweet Margaret," her mom said. "Always." "You look good," Eleanor Huber said at lunchtime. "You've got a great tan, and you've lost weight too, haven't you?" "I guess so." Part of Margaret felt like saying, "What business is it of yours?" On the other hand, Eleanor was the most popular girl in the whole school. "You can sit at our table if you want to," Eleanor said. She flipped a lock of her wavy blonde hair over her shoulder. Margaret hesitated. Usually she sat with Leon, but she was nervous that he'd ask more questions about the valley. "Come on," Eleanor said. "You can tell us about your summer." She made it sound like Margaret had been away on a cruise. Margaret worried that they might ask questions too, but they hardly asked anything. Mostly they talked about TV shows and movie stars and what they were going to wear to school the next day. They had on pastel jogging suits with a parrot insignia on the right sleeve. Margaret found out that Eleanor never ate her desserts. If no one else wanted it, she threw it in the trash. Margaret wanted it, but she felt funny about saying so. She also felt funny about Leon, who was sitting at another table with Tammy. "How come you sat with Eleanor at lunch?" Leon asked. He was sitting on the chair in her bedroom, kicking one of his high tops against the other. "I don't know. I guess I just wanted to see what she was like. How come you sat with Tammy?" Leon ignored the question. "Eleanor only likes you because you're famous," he said. "Last year she said you were disgusting." "You're just saying that because I didn't sit with you." "No, I'm not." Leon raised two fingers. "Scout's honor. She did say it, but I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. She said it after you broke her Barbie doll. Anyway, Tammy's my friend now. She's okay when you get to know her. At least she's not a phony like Eleanor." Margaret glared at Leon, and he scowled back. She thought he'd be glad to have her back, and now he was acting like this. "I'll bet you didn't even miss me." She spat the words out. "Don't be stupid." "I'm not being stupid. I did miss you, but now I wonder why. You act like you're not my friend." "What do you mean?" "Like eating lunch with Eleanor, and you don't want to tell me what happened to you." "Oh." Margaret felt trapped. She didn't want to lie to Leon, but she couldn't tell him the truth either. "I just don't want to talk about it," she said lamely. "Why not?" "Talk to Eleanor about it. I heard you at lunchtime." "Sure, I talked to her a bit, but that doesn't mean what I said was true." Leon stared at Margaret. "What do you mean?" "What I mean is, if I could tell you everything, I would. Why can't you?" "Because somebody else might get hurt." Leon ran one hand through his curly hair. "If you told me?" She nodded. "Who?" I can't say. Is this another one of your stories? It's for real, I swear. But I wouldn't tell anybody. I know, but I promised. I'm supposed to be your best friend. Leon was indignant. You should be loyal, and you shouldn't keep secrets. I can't tell you, Margaret said flatly. I just can't. Arthur was with the secret when he heard his mom coming. He scrambled out from under the eaves of the closet and sat down in the middle of a pile of toys. When she came in, he was playing with his wooden train. She sat down beside him. Tomorrow, you're going to nursery school, she said softly. There will be lots of children and toys to play with. Before, I was afraid to let you go, but you're so much better. She smiled. I wish you could tell me what it was like in the valley, she said. Margaret made it sound beautiful. Arthur looked at his mom. Didn't she know he wasn't supposed to tell her about the rats? Margaret had made him promise. And what was nursery school? I bought you a new outfit for your first day at school. His mom showed him a green shirt and a pair of red overalls with trains on them. He liked trains. Not today, he said, taking them gently out of his hands. Tomorrow. Arthur frowned. He wanted them now. You're going to love it, his mom said, smiling. The next morning, his mom brought the overalls and shirt into his bedroom again. She helped him put them on. Then they got into the car and headed for nursery school. But as they turned the corner beyond the house, Arthur thought of something. What if Christopher came while he was gone? He wouldn't know when Arthur was coming back. Maybe he would just leave. Arthur looked at his mom. Maybe she could tell Christopher that he would be back soon. But no, he wasn't supposed to know about Christopher. It was all so confusing. He started to whine. We're almost there. We just turn this way. His mom patted him on the leg. Here it is. They walked past the playground to a stone building with a red door. When the door opened, Arthur saw children everywhere, sitting at low tables, climbing on a red jungle gym, playing with blocks on the floor. A woman in blue jeans came over and squatted down beside him. He held on to his mom's hand. I'm Teresa, she said. I'll help you find something to play with, and then you can meet a few of the children. I want to go home, Arthur thought, but he couldn't help noticing a large yellow dump truck filled with sand. His mom let go his hand, but she gave him a kiss and said, I'll sit over in the corner while you get used to things. Arthur shook his head. He sat down on the rug and closed his eyes. The next day, his mom didn't stay at nursery school. Arthur cried for a few moments after she left. Teresa held him on her lap. Then the other children came to the table for snack. They were having Hawaiian punch and peanut butter crackers. Teresa put a paper cup filled with punch in front of Arthur, but he wouldn't touch it. He swallowed. Hawaiian punch was really good. He jammed his hands into his pants pockets. If he drank the punch, that would mean he wanted to be here. Later, they played with toys. Arthur sat on the rug and watched. A boy called Stevie was playing with the yellow truck. The truck had a lifter on the front, and Stevie would lift sand out of the sandbox and dump it on a plastic mat. Once he noticed Arthur watching him. He pushed the truck across the rug so it almost touched Arthur's shoe. Then it touched the shoe. Bump, bump. Arthur moved his foot. The truck had a black stick like a gear shift. It seemed real. I'm having an interview with a newspaper reporter tonight, Margaret told Eleanor at lunch on Friday. He's dying to meet me. You should have told me yesterday, Eleanor said. I could have helped you with your hair. What are you going to wear? I Hadn't really thought about that. Eleanor rested her chin in the palm of one hand. Let's see now. You have the turquoise pants. They're out. Then the purple ones. She paused, shook her head. Your jeans are too casual. You never come to school in a dress, but I suppose you must have at least two or three at home. What are they like? I don't think I want to wear a dress. Margaret actually did have one dress in her closet, which she had worn to her cousin's wedding. It was red. She hated it. Is there time for your mom to take you shopping? Eleanor sounded really concerned. If I were you, I'd look for the new dropped waist dresses with stripes. I think they do the most for your figure. I don't think I want to wear a dress, Margaret repeated. She clenched her teeth. She was sorry she'd brought the whole thing up. Across the room, she could see Leon and Tammy bent over a book. Leon pointed at something on the page, and they both laughed. They looked like they were having fun. That night, Margaret and Archie went with their mom to meet Lindsay Scott. She'd been in the valley too. She showed them photographs of the creek and the field where the pine trees grew. I was in Thorn Valley on a canoe trip 2 years ago, she explained. A ranger and I went there when a dam was being built at the north end. We took pictures because we wanted to show the public what would be lost if the land were flooded. Luckily, the plan to build the dam was abandoned. She smiled as she shifted through the pictures. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been. This is where we ate lunch that day. Does it look familiar? I don't think so. Margaret pushed her hands against her knees to keep them from shaking. She felt pricked. No one had told her Lindsay Scott had been in the valley. She didn't want to look at the pictures, but she couldn't help seeing the little beach near Emerald Pond, with the walnut tree behind it and the mountains behind that. It made her feel so homesick. She swallowed. She tried to keep her face expressionless, the way she would if she were hiding something from the teacher at school. I don't recognize those places, she said. Really? Lindsay was disappointed and surprised too. Margaret didn't seem interested in the pictures, and her tone of voice reminded Lindsay of phrases she'd had memorized as a child. I had a good time at the party, Homer, or thanks for the socks, Grandma. They were just what I wanted. Margaret realized she had to say something. We got our drinking water from a creek, she said, and we caught crayfish and frogs there too. I made a fire on the beach and cooked them over hot stones. How did you know to do that? Margaret almost smiled with relief. She'd practiced this question with Nicodemus. I'd seen people do it at a clam bake on Cape Cod a couple of years ago. Did you ever see signs of civilization in the valley? Margaret shook her head. Lindsay persisted. Like Indian arrowheads or old soda bottles, or anything that might suggest people had been there? Margaret shook her head again. I thought I heard a helicopter once, but then the sound went away. I didn't know it was real until my dad told me they had flown helicopters on the other side of the mountain range. Lindsay leaned forward. I had a strange experience when I was in the valley, she confided. After we paddled up the creek, we ate lunch at the beach I showed you in the picture. I bent over afterward to rinse my hands, and I found something in the sand. She paused. It was a little basket, about 4 inches long, with straps attached to it. It was beautifully made, and it hadn't rotted a bit, so it couldn't have been there long. We thought it must have been a child's toy. Where is it now? Margaret's voice was hushed. Lindsay sighed. I lost it while we were there. I must have dropped it in the water accidentally. I looked, but it had simply disappeared. Margaret wasn't sure whether to feel disappointed or relieved. I never saw anything like that, she lied. But in her mind, she felt the rough texture of the baskets the rats wore to carry nuts and wild herbs back to the nest. When they swam in the creek, they often stacked their baskets just below the dried milkweeds on the bank there. That was all part of the secret. And this woman had held one of those baskets, had examined it while she stood on the beach where Margaret and Raxo and Christopher played. Did she know other things about the valley? Did she have secrets too? The interview was over. Lindsay shook her hand warmly. She asked Margaret to call if she thought of anything she'd forgotten to say and gave her the phone number. She walked with them across the parking lot beside the newspaper offices. It was dusk. The silhouettes of downtown buildings loomed to the west. The alley near their car was littered with trash and bits of brick. A gray, whiskered face looked up from its meal of garbage, then turned and fled. "Christopher!" Arthur screamed. "Come back!" The rat disappeared into a hole leading to the sewer. Arthur saw the look on Margaret's face and realized his mistake. The rat in the alley had not been Christopher at all. He felt his heart break inside him, and he fell to the pavement, sobbing. "I told," he cried. His mother bent over him. "Artie," she whispered, "you spoke." She picked him up and held him tightly in her arms. Chapter 22. Justin wasn't that pleased that Raxo and Christopher had spent all morning dreaming about their trip instead of helping out. "Have you two forgotten that you're part of this community?" he asked sternly. "You were supposed to gather the rest of the carrots and onions. Instead, you lay around chattering like a couple of squirrels." "We weren't chattering, we were making plans." "You can plan and work at the same time, can't you?" Raxo frowned. "Last fall, Nicodemus said we could leave the carrots on the ground and put mulch over them. That was easier." "Well, this year we're pulling the carrots up, and the onions too," Justin snapped. "Get to it." "I wish Nicodemus was back in charge," Raxo muttered to Christopher. "I miss him." Raxo hadn't meant for Justin to hear that, but he did, and instead of getting mad, he looked wistful. "So do I." He took a deep breath. "But since he's not, we have to go on with our plan, and that means work. It seems hard now, but later you'll understand." "These things are really big." Raxo was standing on his hind legs, his front paws curled around the green fronds of a carrot. He pulled with all his might, but the carrot didn't budge. "Must be the new fertilizer," Timothy suggested. Christopher pulled too. "Ah! I've got an idea." Raxo braced his hind paws against the carrot and leaned back, still holding onto the top. "Now you pull me." "Okay." Christopher started out by putting his paws around Raxo's middle, but he couldn't get a good grip, so he let go and grabbed his tail instead. "Heave ho! Ouch! It's moving." "It isn't moving. I'm moving. Because if I don't move, you're going to pull off my tail." Raxo jumped off the carrot in disgust and rubbed his hindquarters where they attached to his tail. "That hurts." "Sorry." Christopher did seem sorry. "I was just trying to get the job done." Raxo kept rubbing. "Margaret could have pulled these up in a minute," Christopher said, "and Artie could have carried them down to the nest in a big bundle." He sat down on the ground. "What do you think Artie's doing now?" "He's probably eating potato chips. That's what I'd be doing if I were him." "He's probably thinking about me, just like I'm thinking about him. He's wondering when I'll get there." "Could be eating M&Ms, Raxa said. "Those are good too." "He and I swore an oath of friendship. We're going to be companions for the rest of our lives. We may not always be together. After all, friends have to part sometimes, like you and Timothy. But we'll always be thinking of each other." "The first thing The first thing I'm going to do when we get to his house is look in the refrigerator, Raxo said to himself. I heard that. Christopher whirled around. You're not even listening to me. You're thinking about food. Oh, Raxo blinked. I thought you two were supposed to be pulling up carrots, Isabella said triumphantly. But instead, you're just standing here arguing? Where did you come from? I was behind that bush counting turnips when I heard someone talking. Then the voices got so loud I couldn't concentrate, so I decided to investigate. You mean you were spying on us? Christopher said in disgust. And now you're going to tattle to Justin. I have no need to tattle, Isabella said grandly. Justin knows that I'm responsible. He's asked me to supervise the harvest of all the root crops, and that includes carrots. What? She nodded. I've been named Root Crop Coordinator. Since when? Since half an hour ago. Well, Justin talked to us since then, and he didn't mention you, did he, Raxo? Raxo avoided answering deliberately. He didn't want to make Isabella mad. It was true that he and Christopher hadn't been working as hard as they should have. On the other hand, Isabella was acting stuck up. We did try to pull the carrots up, he said, but they won't come out. What's the hurry anyway? All I know is that all of the root crops have to be harvested in the next 2 weeks, Isabella said. Beatrice and Justin both said so, and I intend to make sure that happens. If you do, you might get promoted, Christopher said nastily. Cabbage queen. You better pull up those carrots. Leave me alone, Christopher glared. In 2 weeks, I'll be on the way to see Artie. You won't be bossing me around then. Artie, you're getting boring, Christopher. Come on, Isabella, Raxo intervened. You know you miss the children, too. You said so last night. Margaret, yes. She turned out to be a very nice girl after I helped her move the nest. But Arthur flooded the storeroom, and he broke our bridge, too. Isabella's tone softened. She stopped. Actually, I do miss him. He let me ride on his shoulder a couple of times, too. And Margaret used to sing a nice song to Artie when we were walking together at night. It was called Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Isabella sat down on the ground. I wish I were going to see them, she sniffed. I want to go too. Raxo glanced at Christopher reassuringly, then turned to Isabella. I'd love to have you come, but wouldn't someone else have to supervise the root crops? I mean, you'd have to give up your title, which would be too bad. Isabella picked herself up off the ground and wiped her eyes. Of course, Sally would do a good job supervising the root crop harvest, Raxa went on. She's dependable, and I won't go, even if you beg me. Even if you beg me, Isabella interrupted. I'm needed here. I can't just run off and leave my work. Raxo and Christopher didn't say anything. Now you two, get back to work, Isabella commanded, and she marched off.